Hello, and welcome to another episode of Diaspora Highlights. It is produced right here on our Facebook platform as well as our YouTube channel at 19 hours every Wednesday. It comes to you with the best wishes of the Diaspora Unit, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. I am Marcy Parker. Thank you for joining us. This week's episode will be recapping a webinar that was hosted by the Diaspora Unit early in 2023, where we looked at acquiring Guyanese documents, what you need to know. And so this week, we will be listening to Registrar General of the General Register's Office, and that's Mr. Raymond Cummings, the Chief Elections Officer for the Guyana Elections Commission, Mr. Vishnu Prasad, also the Director for the Tax Advisory Services of the Guyana Revenue Authority, as well as Superintendent of Police and Deputy Chief Immigration Officer, and that's from the Central Immigration and Passport Office, Mr. Stephen Telford.
My name is Raymond Cummings. I am the Registrar General at the General Register Office. I have been here just over 2 years now, and for those of you who have had recent dealings with the GRO and may have had dealings in the past would realize that there are a lot of changes taking place here. Now, the General Register Office, we deal with the issuing of birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, the issuing of certificates for overseas born Guyanese, which I will deal with in the future in a bit, because I know that that is what will concern many of you. And we also do registration of overseas, of Guyanese who would have died overseas, and of course with adoptions, among some of the other things. But I wish to, in my presentation, start by defining what each of these entail. And I know many of you are interested in the way that you can acquire these documents. So let me start first by reminding you that the birth certificate, which is the first document that you have, that you receive, that says that you're a Guyanese, is issued by the General Register Office. That certificate is issued after a registration would have been done at your place of birth, or the closest registration center to your place of birth if you were born outside of a medical institution, be it private or public. When a person is born, that certificate, that registration rather, is forwarded to the General Register Office, and there are some statutory times that is given in the Act, the Registration of Births in this Act, for that to be submitted, and that is 14 days after. You have 14 days to register the child, and then after that, the registration center has 14 days to supply it to the General Register Office. So a new birth, the registration would be with us within 28 days after the birth of the child. So a certificate for a newborn child can statutorily, given all the necessary deadlines and so on that is written into the Act, can be issued after 28 days. However, you will appreciate the fact that the registration, having reached the General Register Office, will have to go through certain administrative procedures. It has to be booked, logged, and entered into the database before the certificate is issued. We generally ask persons to give us 6 weeks after the birth of a new child before a certificate is ready to be issued. And I say ready to be issued because that registration then would have to be entered into the database. You would realize that from 2021 May, the birth certificates issued are no longer handwritten. They are issued via it's a computer generated certificate, and I have one here so that you can have a look at what the new certificate looks like, because the persons who have been out of the jurisdiction for some time will not have seen the new certificate. It is generated from the database that we've created with all the records that had been created years ago and some that are still being generated now. It comes with a QR code at the top. This is the top right-hand corner of the certificate that is read by a special software that is shared by the persons who will need this certificate. The signature on the certificate also, if you look, it's not it's generated from the computer, so the signature is there and it's scanned and it's placed on the certificate. The certificate comes with a number of security features which for the persons who use the certificate for identification and other purposes, that information has been shared with them. They also have the access to the software that allows them to read the QR code on the top right-hand corner. So when a certificate is presented, it is easy for them to be able to check it to ensure that it is a genuine certificate issued by the General Register Office. A reissue certificate can be issued basically immediately if there is an emergency. However, what we have done, and this is one of the changes that we have put in place, we have had from the December 1, 2022, the facility to allow persons to apply online for these certificates. And I think it's a number that you should all have. We have set up WhatsApp numbers to allow persons to apply online. And so they can literally send a WhatsApp message to this number requesting a copy of their birth certificate or marriage or death, any certificate, and we can have it produced and ready for them to pick up or to send out within 3 to 5 days. The death certificates and the marriage certificates are still being handwritten. We are working on getting that database updated enough so that we can be able to print all of that, and we're hoping that that will be possible by the end of the year. That's not to say that we do not print them. We have the ability to print some, but because the database has not been completed, we cannot print all. So we are hoping that by the end of this year, we are able to print all marriage and death certificates. Now, I spoke about the new births and the fact that you can uplift that anytime after 6 weeks. The old births or reapplication for a birth certificate, that takes, if you apply online, 3 to 5 days before it's ready for pickup. And if you use the other facilities, but that is, if you walk in, you can come into the office and have it done, and you get it within 7 days if it's in Georgetown. If it is in Essequibo or Berbice, it will take about 14 days, and I'll explain why. We have established fully functional offices at Essequibo, at Anna Regina, and in Berbice at New Amsterdam, that allows persons to go there, have their records searched and identified, ensure that it's a correct record. And that can be delivered to them within 14 days because we have a physical courier that comes to the office every 14 days to the office in Georgetown where all the printing is done. And you will appreciate, because of the fact that the database needs to be secured and the printing with the security features needs to be secured, that all printing is done at a central location and then that is distributed to the various areas. So we have a physical courier that comes down every 14 days from Berbice and from Essequibo that returns with your documents. So if you are overseas and you have relatives in Berbice or Essequibo or in Georgetown, you can literally apply online, and you can ask them to pick up your document and have it delivered to you if you wish it that way. However, if you wish that the document to be posted to you, that will incur the postage cost, which you will have to bear if you want us to do it, or if you want someone else to do it, you will have to bear that cost. The death certificates, if it's a reissue, the same thing, it's 3 to 5 days, or if you're in Essequibo or Berbice, it will be the 14 days. For the new death, if you had a death occurring within a year, or a marriage occurring within a year, the time to pick up those certificates is 24 hours. We have an arrangement where you can get those certificates within 24 hours, and that is because they're still being handwritten, and it's easy for us to have them written and handed to you within 24 hours of your request. However, persons, if you come early in the morning, you will appreciate that you can get it the same day. But the reason why we put 24 hours is because people would want to come at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just before the office is closed, and request the document the same day, which creates some problems because you have administrative stuff that you have to do, book log, and all of that, the registrations to get it done. The other thing that we deal with is the registration and issuing of certificates or of birth for overseas born Guyanese. Now, if you are a Guyanese by birth and you have a child that is born in a foreign country, the Constitution allows that we register that child at your request to be registered as a Guyanese born overseas, which gives them all the rights and so on as a normal citizen. That certificate that is issued is different from the one that is issued to Guyanese who are born in Guyana, and I'll show you a sample of that certificate I have here. It looks different. This is how it looks. I should see a copy of it here. For the persons who were born prior to in the 1980s, the 70s, and early 80s would be familiar with this form. That is a form that is issued to Guyanese who were born overseas. The information on that form reflects that of your registration in whichever country you would have been born. If it's not an English-speaking country, you will have to submit the original birth certificate along with a translation in English of that certificate, the parent birth certificate, whichever parent it is, that is a Guyanese, their birth certificate, and some form of identification of the parent. And if the child, a picture ID that is, and if the child is now an adult, they'll have to also submit a form of identification from whichever country they are claiming they would have been born. That information is then sent for verification, and a certificate is subsequently issued, and you can use it as a birth certificate to do whatever you wish as a Guyanese. We also do the registration of Guyanese who would have died overseas, and this is something that we are hoping that more Guyanese take advantage of, and they use the facility, because we're finding cases where persons would have died overseas, and because they weren't registered here, when their relatives are trying to do things like estates and so on, they're finding some difficulty obtaining death certificates or copies of their death certificates from overseas. And to do that also, you'll need to submit a copy of the death certificate from the foreign country, along with some form of identification of the person, and the birth certificate or birth information of the person, so that we can verify that this person was indeed a Guyanese by birth or a Guyanese who would have died overseas, and we enter that into the record and it remains here. And you can use these certificates to do just about anything that a birth certificate is required for. We also have issued certificates from what is called the Register of Adopted Persons. And that is, if an adoption was done in Guyana, you can request a certificate. The adoption order has to be lodged here, and that information is entered into the Register of Adopted Persons, and the certificate is so issued. Once a person has been adopted, the original record of their birth is cancelled, and the record that remains is the adoption record, and that is what is used as the birth record for that person. I have had requests from persons who are processing documents for citizenship and residency and so on, for the original birth certificate of the person who is adopted. That is not something that can be issued. You would normally issue a letter, and it can be issued because the record is sealed. Therefore, the only thing that can open that record is an order of the court. That is the only way that we can issue that certificate. So if it is that you are processing those documents and they have requested a copy of the original birth record, then we will issue a letter pointing out that this child has been adopted, and this is the information we have on the adoption, and so that a court order is necessary for that record to be issued. The other issue is, and I think would be of interest to you, if a Guyanese by birth is living in a foreign country and they adopt a child, that child is also eligible to be registered as a Guyanese. And therefore, the same procedure that is applied to persons who have children overseas is applied to that case, and that child can be registered as the child of a Guyanese born overseas, and therefore that child becomes a Guyanese. The child don't have to be Guyanese by birth or even have the heritage of Guyanese. Once they are legally adopted and that documentation is presented to us, it is verified to be authentic, then that a certificate is issued to that parent for them to use for the child.
I am Stephen Telford, Superintendent of Police and Deputy Chief Immigration Officer for the State of Guyana. I would have taken over the helm of this office on the 5th of August, 2022, on to today. As it is known, the Passport Office primarily addresses the issue of production and delivery of passports and other immigration services to the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and the Diaspora. Over the years, we have done some decentralizing of the passport services within the state of Guyana to eliminate persons having to travel from long distances to come to the main office, which is located in Georgetown. Quite recently, we had opened an office at Letem, where passports are, the applications are accepted and passports are delivered. We have recently done an outreach at Camarang in the Upper Mazaruni, where the officers would have gone into Camarang, and persons who desirous of applying for a passport would have done that, and those passports war return. Taking over the helm of the passport office in August of 2022, I met with a huge challenge which had to do primarily with the backlog of passports. When I would have taken over, my backlog states primarily for the diaspora was 5,442. And I wish to indicate that as of the 25th of January 2023, for the diaspora passport outstanding, it's a total of 448. So myself and staff had comprehensively worked assiduously in order to bring this backlog greatly down. And to date, from August the 5th, we would have, for the diaspora, delivered or produced 12,191 passports to those persons. However, there is still an amount of outstanding applications which are pending for the year 2018 to 2022, which amounts to 383. And that in itself, I'm working together with the consulate of the other jurisdiction to have this issue resolved, because I think some of the issues, they're quite simple to address. But as soon as those pending issues are submitted, these applications will be processed and the persons required the passports will be able to have them.
My name is Vishnu Prasad. I'm the Chief Election Officer, and I would, as is expected, be treating with issues associated with application for preparation, production, and issuance of the National Identification Card. This being one of our two primary mandates at GCOM, which basically is about conducting registration of eligible persons under the National Registration Act, Chapter 1908, and the conduct of general, regional, and local government elections as they become periodically due, or in some cases, even when they are called, there are provisions for these elections to be held before they actually become due. So against those few comments, I would start off by dealing with who is it that could apply for registration. Now, the Constitution provides that anyone who is a Guyanese citizen by birth, descent, or naturalization, or is a citizen from a Commonwealth country who is living in Guyana for 1 year or more, qualify for registration or would qualify for registration, providing that he or she would be 14 years old or over by a qualifying date. Those qualifying dates used to be determined by the Commission up to last year, but with the recent amendments to the National Registration Act, qualifying dates, well, the Act now provides for registration to be done in 2 cycles within each calendar year. First cycle being from January to May 31st, and then from July to November 30th, with the qualifying date to be 14 years and over in the first cycle being June 30th, and the qualifying date for the second cycle to be December 31. So any person who meet those criteria can apply for registration through the Guyana Elections Commission. Now, to be registered, once you would have met the criteria, The first requirement, we have registration offices across all of Guyana's administrative regions. In some in the more populated regions, we have multiple offices that are responsible for demarcated registration areas. So those offices will be responsible for the registration of persons who reside in those areas. So a person who meets the registration criteria would visit our office. He or she is required to complete an application for registration form, which is form 1. It's called R01, but it's the form 1. To complete it doesn't mean we won't give you the form. We have able and competent staff there who will take the information from the applicant and complete the form. Now, this is specific to first-time registrants or persons who would have never been registered before. The process includes having your photograph taken and your fingerprints captured. Now, these are all to ensure that we have the complete fields of information required to process your application. Now, you may turn up and tell us that I'm a Guyanese citizen and I am of the age to be registered and all of that. But that is not enough. To do so, you will have to present the required source document. Now, the two main source documents that we accept for registration are: 1, an original birth certificate, and 2, a valid Guyana passport. Either of these two documents could be used to apply for registration. However, there are some supplementary documents which may be required depending on the way or the name that you want to be used for registration. For example, your birth certificate might show your name as Vishnu Prasad, but since going to school, you are using the name of Vishnu Narayan. So naturally, you would want to be registered as Vishnu Narayan because your academic certificates and all that would have that name. To do so, we would ask you to go and have a deed poll done so that and this is a statutory document which can substantiate the fact that you have been using the name Narayan and is known by that name. And by that, now, we will use your birth certificate as the base document, but give you the name that you desire on the basis of the deed poll. In another case, it may be a married woman who wants to be registered by her married name. And I must note at this stage that a married woman does not necessarily have to be registered by her married name. She can be registered in her maiden name. There is no provision that mandates that such a person be registered by her married name. Now, in the case of the woman being desirous of being registered in her married name, she will have to provide us with her original marriage certificate. So that is another supporting document. And I want to come back to something that Raymond mentioned earlier about Guyanese citizens by descent. They're born abroad, they don't have birth certificates. Such persons are constitutionally entitled to be registered. Now, they can go and get the same, they can go and be registered by the GRO as Guyanese citizens, and the same certificate that Raymond showed us, they can bring to us. We accept that as a source document for registration. However, the overseas Guyanese by descent can come to us also with their foreign birth certificate or passport and a birth certificate of any of the Guyanese parents, but they must also have a photo ID of that Guyanese parent to substantiate the use of that birth certificate. Now, these are all different documentation that are required if you're going to apply for registration. The bottom line here is that you must be able to substantiate that you are a Guyanese citizen by birth, descent, or naturalization. In the case of naturalization, the Ministry of Home Affairs issues naturalization certificate after they would have gone through their own process to before they issue that document. The same applies to another document called Certificate of Registration that the Ministry of Home Affairs also issue, and which is a document that we accept to register persons. Now, in the case of a Commonwealth citizen who is living in Guyana for 1 year or more, the passport is good enough, but we would also be using that passport to check that the applicant is in Guyana for 1 year or more, and their stay in Guyana has a legal status. Now, having gone through this process, up to last year, we were required to verify that the applicant is living at the address that he would have or she would have provided in the application form. To do so, we visited the address and we had to find that person there. The amendments that were brought into force last year now provides that we do not have to find the person at that address, but we do have to visit the address to verify that it is in fact a bona fide address. And this is linked to elections because elections, preparation of lists and voting requires that a voter is registered to vote in the division in which he's lived. Now, division here, we have electoral divisions and registration divisions. So one of the effects of becoming registered is that it leads to how you would be listed to vote. And that is why we are required to now verify the residency address that you provide. Now, that is one step going forward. We then have to, because we have your fingerprints, and to guard against persons being registered more than once in the National Register of Registrants, we send the fingerprints of every applicant overseas to be cross-matched against the fingerprints of persons who are already in the National Register of Registrants to check to ensure that they are not already registered. Now, it is necessary for us to do this because we have had, since the commencement of since the last house-to-house registration that was done in 2008, right up to the last cycle of registration that we did last year, persons are registered and they come to register again for various reasons, some perhaps not even mentionable. So we have to do this to ensure that you're not already registered. If we find that you're already registered, we will cancel the registration. If we find that it is a genuine mistake or the application was done in error, we may, depending on our internal considerations, cancel the early one and keep the latest one because it would have updated information. If we find that there is some indication that skullduggery was intended, we may put the matter in the hands of the police for investigation, as we have done in the past. Now, once the fingerprints come back clean and there is no association with any previous registration, the application, the transaction will be committed to the National Registration Register of Registrants, and immediately thereafter, your ID card would be produced, sent out under some security measures to the registration office where you would have applied for registration, and where only the applicant can go to collect that ID card. Now, I would have gone ahead of myself a bit here, because in the registration process also, there are some other things that you can do. For example, you might already have been registered under one name, but due to necessity, you may be going by a different name now. For example, I'm using a woman again. A woman would have been registered when she was unmarried, but now that she's married, wants to start to use her married name. Such a person, and there are other examples that can be used, such a person can go to our registration office to apply for a change of name. This is a far more simple process, but it does require the presentation of the marriage certificate to effect that change. There are also situations where persons, for one reason or the other, might have incorrect information of their ID card, which might have gone through since at the time of the application. There is a process for such a person to apply for a correction to those particulars. Now, these are the type of transactions that can be done as it relates to registration and the other related transactions that are all connected to the preparation and issuance of ID cards. Now, it would be remiss of me if I do not mention that the amendments that were brought into effect last year, December, provides for very stiff penalties to be applied in cases where persons are found to have deliberately provided false information to GCOM for the purpose of registration, for the purpose of procuring an ID card, for whatever reason. Those fines can range from $250,000 right up to $5 million plus 5 years imprisonment. Plus, it's not either or. And so we're always, well, especially since this new law came out, we're very particular in making this information available to all concerned as a means of not only pushing them in the direction where they will not commit an offense, but it also helps us in terms of updating and maintaining our register of registrants in the best accurate way possible.
So long.
I am Nourisha Bob Semple. I am the manager for tax advisory services. So this evening, I join you to give you a little talk about Guyana Revenue Authority and to say thank you for the invitation on behalf of the Commissioner General of the Guyana Revenue Authority. So I know persons may generally tend to say, oh, GRA is a difficult place for us to get our documents that we're requesting. But I want you to know our services have been very improved under the Commissioner General, our current Commissioner General, Mr. Godfrey Stacia. We have online services. We also have our e-services platform, Optimal. I like to start there. So if we have persons out in our overseas and you want to check up on your tax status, all you need to do is to have your e-services account. So you can register for e-services once you have a taxpayer identification number, an email address. You send those information, or you yourself can go on our website to eservices@gra.gov.gy and register yourself for your e-services account. And that way you can check up on your taxes. Even if you have a business operation in Guyana and you're overseas, you can still check to see what is happening with your tax status. You do not have to wait and come in and join a line to get that information. So we are online. Just to start off there, we are online. We have our WhatsApp services as well. I'm giving you that communication information because I know most of you will want that kind of detail. So I will share in the chat our WhatsApp numbers for tax advisory services. We do have other WhatsApp numbers for our tax exemption, because persons who are overseas that might want to come back to Guyana, maybe they're applying for their tax exemption concessions, then they can use that WhatsApp medium to get onto our offices. And as well, if you have queries with regard to taxation, you can message us on WhatsApp as well. We have our tax advisory email address, taxadvisory@gra.gov.gy. We have information on our website that is readily accessible to you. And if perhaps you are unable to find that information that's on our website that you're requiring, you can write us at taxadvisory@gra.gov.gy, or you can send if it's an e-services query. For those of you who are already online, you can write us there and we can answer all of your questions relative to taxation. So I'm assuming everyone understands that the Guyana Revenue Authority is responsible for a wide variety of taxes. If I should say so, we administer not only income tax, but corporation tax, property tax. And the property tax I'm referring to is not rates and taxes that you usually pay to your NDCs on your houses. We do get questions from persons asking us about how we can provide them with the status of their rates and taxes. The tax that the GRA administers, it's a wealth tax on your property. So if you're overseas and you have assets in Guyana and the threshold has been increased, for those who do not know, it's no longer 7.5 million, it's now 40 million. So if you have property in excess of 40 million, you're still expected to file your property tax returns and pay your taxes on that property that you have here in Guyana. However, if the property has not exceeded that 40 million, then you're not required to pay taxes on that property nor file a property tax return. That's a popular question, hence my talking about that too upfront. Also, we have persons who may be inquiring about their tax exemption if they're returning to Guyana to live here. What are the tax concessions that they're entitled to? We have all of that information on the website based on whether you're a student who is returning, if you are just remigrating because you want to come home and stay, or if you are a settler, maybe you're not from Guyana, but you want to come here to Guyana and reside, then all of that, we have concessions for you. And if you write to us, we'll be able to give you the long list of concessions that you're entitled to. I want to tell you as well that the GRA, if you do not know, we are not the regular tax agency. When I say that, I mean in most countries we have customs by itself, and then we have internal revenue by itself. We do have both agencies in one, which is internal revenue and customs, trade, excise and trade administration, being administered under the one umbrella Guyana Revenue Authority. So at the helm of the organization, we have Mr. Godfrey Stacia. He's the Commissioner General of the Guyana Revenue Authority. We have our Deputy Commissioner General, Ms. Hema Khan, and the Comptroller for Customs is Mr. Rohan Biku. So those are the persons that have responsibilities and the hierarchy of our organization. Of course, we have the governing board, and the GRE reports to the Minister of Finance of Guyana. All right. For those who are not aware, I'm just letting you know. I also want you to know that we have in administering our taxation system, we have 8 locations, regional offices around Guyana. All right. So we have in almost all of the regions. We're trying to get to all of the regions where possible, and where we can't get to all of the regions, we are going as close as possible so persons from one region can go to the next region. I'd like to share with you a little tax map of our organization, where we are located across Guyana. We not only have regional offices, but we have ports, we have Sufferance Wharfs. Oh, I have a low battery. I may have to link over. So I'm not sure if you're able to see my screen now. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, good. So this is a tax map of the various offices that we have, that we're located at. So we have Mabaruma all the way at the top of the map of Guyana. We have our Anna Regina branch. We have a branch at Parika. We have at Linden. We have at New Amsterdam. So persons do not necessarily have to come all the way to Georgetown to conduct business. And you can go, and of course we have our headquarters right in Camp Street. Okay, so we're located all over. We have almost all of the services are being administered at all of these branch offices, including the license services. You can go to the regional office and actually apply for your license. Again, the processes have been simplified, even for your license. If you have a plastic card license, you just need to come in with that plastic card, go straight into our lodgement area, and you're able to get your license in the same day. Your TIN certificate, for those persons who are applying for their TIN certificate, the process is same day as well. Of course, the fee is $1,000. And if you are requesting a reprint of that certificate, it's $2,000. All right. So we have a lot of improvements that have been going on at the Guyana Revenue Authority, and our processes have been very simple. Of course, it is important that persons who are actually applying for our services must understand what needs to be done. And it's not that difficult if you know what you have to do. So I would encourage you to, before you start your transaction, if you are not sure, write to us at taxadvisory@gra.gov.gy and ask your questions, and we will be able to provide you with the guidance you require so that your processes are very quick and simple. All right, it's not that difficult.
This has been Diaspora Highlights, courtesy of the Diaspora Unit, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Guyana. On this week's episode, you have been listening to the Registrar General of the General Register's Office, Mr. Raymond Cummings, Superintendent of Police and Deputy Chief Immigration Officer, Mr. Stephen Telford, Chief Elections Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission, Mr. Vishnu Prasad, and Serenity Bob Semple, the Director of the Tax Advisory Services of the Guyana Revenue Authority, sharing on acquiring Guyanese documents, what you need to know. Join us next Wednesday right here for another episode of Diaspora Highlights. Our videographer for this episode has been Mr. Fardeen Ali. I'm Marcy Parker, wishing you a wonderful rest of your evening. So long.